Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
So I'll tell you, the thing is that one thing which worked for us and which we hope it will, that content and story is a driving force for us. Money is not, and that is why we feel that we have achieved what we wanted to do. We always consider ourselves a boutique company where we are just doing 3-4 good shows. So when money is not the driving factor, and I'm not saying money is bad because it will eventually happen. So I feel that has worked for us.
Over the course of last few years, the rise of OTT platforms has empowered many storytellers to tell wide-ranging offbeat stories. Stories that perhaps might not have made it to the audiences through traditional channels like cinemas and television. This in turn has given rise to many interesting production studios to create that off-the-beaten-track content by backing solid, fresh ideas and concepts. One of the more interesting production studios is Bombay Fables, the studio behind Serious Men and Decoupled. Their slate is pretty interesting too, consisting of Delhi Crime Season 2, Asur Season 2, and a couple of very, very interesting biopics, which, from what today's guest shared with us, sound refreshingly different from the barrage of biopics we have seen so far. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. Before moving on, as always, an important request to all listeners of the podcast. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So do consider subscribing. Independent podcasts like this one don't have a platform ecosystem for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, and I can't harp on this enough, please share the episode on social media, because that's the only way people would discover the podcast. So again, if you like the episode, please do share with your friends. Also, do take a minute to review and rate the podcast. That would be much appreciated and would help the podcast. Back to today's episode. Sejal Shah, co-founder of Bombay Fables, joins me to talk about OTT trends, building a studio focused on good stories, lessons learned from the success of Serious Men and Decoupled, handling budgets, working with Netflix, star system vis-a-vis OTT, the challenges in working with stars, and making good balanced biopics. She also shared the story of two outsiders, driven by a shared passion for telling solid stories, taking the leap of faith and jumping in to form Bombay Fables. Here goes. Hey Sejal, how are you?
Fine. How are you? Finally get to meet you.
I'm doing great. First of all, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. I have liked both of the shows that Bombay Fables has so far made. And I'm really glad that I have you on the podcast here to talk about your journey, Bombay Fables journey, and also to learn from you and gather some insights on the OTT space. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Even I'm looking forward to it because I've been listening to your podcast and I really enjoy it. And like I said, I'm a big fan of podcasts and I've listened to a lot of your interviews and they're always interesting.
Thank you so much. So, Sejal, my first question to you is that you come from a journalism background, right? And you have also been a documentary maker. You have also made a feature film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So could we begin this chat by you telling us a bit more about your journey up until the foundation of Bombay Fables so that we know as to, where you're coming from?
So essentially, I'm born and brought up in Bombay and I started journalism very early. When I was in college at Xavier's, I've always liked writing, and more than writing, I think it was interviewing people, meeting people, telling stories. And I'm a very curious person, so I like to ask a lot of questions. I still do. So people are all the time, people who don't know I've been a journalist are very surprised that, she's always asking questions. I was like, don't mind me because I have a habit of asking questions. So yeah, so I started as a journalist. I worked with the Week magazine. It's a English news weekly in India, and I was in the Bombay bureau for about 8 years. I was doing, but surprisingly, I never did films. I was in the political bureau, so I did mostly politics and elections, and once in a while we did entertainment. So yeah, so that was what I did for a long time, and then I was traveling a lot. I was trying to cover the Sri Lankan elections. I've covered all the elections, and basically that was my genre in journalism. And what happened was, this was that was the only place I've ever worked in my life, and it was one of the best places that I really enjoyed working in a weekly, because what was happening is you could tell, unlike newspapers and all in magazines, you did weekly stories, but you wrote a lot. You could write in-depth articles, and you were writing 5, 10,000 words every time, and it was fun writing, and it was just not like about news or about a controversy or something specific. You could tell in-depth stories. It was like that. It's like from movies to series. Series you can tell a lot of story. You can go to the character and stuff like that. So yeah, so I enjoyed doing that, but after some time I felt that, I'm the kind of person, I like to be excited by whatever I'm doing. And after some time I felt that journalism, in fact I did very well in journalism. I got evening scholarships. I moved to London, and I worked with Sunday Times London for a while. But it was just that I felt I was not excited about it, and I wanted to do filmmaking. But for me, filmmaking was restricted to that point. I wanted to do documentary films, because I felt that that was the extension of journalism. Because documentary films, and at that point, like 15 years back, documentary films were, it had a bad name, because everybody was used to seeing documentaries. When you're forced to watch before a movie, you remember all those boring
Right.
documentaries, not the ones we are there.
Right.
So I wanted to make documentaries, but I wanted to make interesting stuff, and I thought it was easy, because all I needed to learn was to tell the story with the camera instead of a pen. So I thought, okay, it's going to be easy. So I quit journalism, and it was very strange, and everybody was very surprised by it. But I just said one day I'm just going to quit, and then I went to the US. I did a short course in filmmaking in LA, and I made some short films, and I came back, and then I immediately started doing documentaries. So the first documentary I made was something, it was called a Joginis. They are something with the Devdasis in the South, a Tamasha dancer called Mangla Tamasha Party. So both these documentaries I wrote, directed, produced on my own, because at that time we didn't have any platforms. We didn't have anything. Documentaries were just made. You got some money funding, and nobody watched it. So
Right.
nobody's seen my documentaries, but I made them because I was so fascinated, and it was fun. I've lived with all those people. For a year, I was just doing one documentary. I went to Hyderabad. I stayed there for a while with the Joginis. And then when I finished that, I did another documentary on a Tamasha dancer from Maharashtra. I stayed with her, and it was very exciting. But and the documentaries did very well. I won a lot of awards. It went to Geneva. I was traveling all over, but nobody watched it. It was like that, and I didn't make any money on it, which was like fine. But it was just a passion project, and I thought I could continue making documentaries. But what happened was, after some time, it was very difficult to keep making, because there was no funding, there were no platforms to make them. And at that time, I was approached by, because Joginis did very well. It was on the Devdasi. So I was, out of the blue, I was approached by somebody, and they said, why don't you do it a feature film on that? And I had never wanted to make a film. I didn't want to do it at all. And I was like, oh, wow. And, so I started working on a script on that, and it was very exciting. And I thought, like, wow, it's so easy to make a film. And we worked on it. We signed a lot of, like, at that time, we met Karishma Kapoor, and we met a lot of actors. And it took about 2, 3 years, but the film didn't happen, because the producer passed away, and, a lot of stuff happened. So then at that time, then, because I had started to make movie, and then I got obsessed with making a film, because it didn't happen. I said, okay, I have to make a film. And I started working on a script. It was a dark comedy, and I wrote it for about 2 years. I had another writer with me called Amar. He's from the US. Both of us wrote it, and we finished the script. And at that point, because see, I had never assisted anybody. I didn't know anybody from the film industry. Nobody in my family from the film industry. I never entered a set. So for me, it was like it all. See, I felt that most things in my life came from the fact that I was very naive, and I was an outsider. So when you're naive, you think it's very easy to do everything. So we wrote the script, and that was 6 years, 7 years back. 7 years back, and it was a dark comedy, and it was something actually nobody should have made it because it was so bizarre, at that point. Now people are used to seeing different kind of films with the platform and all. And we wrote the script because obviously, like I said, that I didn't know that it's not possible to make that film. But you are so you're naive and you think everything is possible when it's new. And then but lucky for me is that time Sanjay Dutt, I met him through somebody, and he was starting his own production house, and his wife Manita, they liked the script, and then the film just happened. And I was like, at that point, it was 7 years back, and I said, wow, it's so easy to make a movie. It's so easy, and I don't know what the people are talking about. So it came again from naive, it went to arrogance. And I said, it's so easy. Like, if you have a good script, you can do it. And it was Sanjay Dutt, Amitabh Bachchan, Jackie Shroff. It was a big film, and we shot that film. But unfortunately, after that, Sanju went to jail, and then the movie got stuck for various reasons. In fact, now we are finishing the film, and I'm hoping to be. But at that point, and it was funny because again when I started to make the film, so I wrote the script, and then we got the film made. And when I entered the set on the first time as a director, it was like I was lucky because I was so prepared. And I'm a very hard worker. So sometimes when you don't have so much talent, you work much harder. So I'm a very hard working person, so I'd really prepared a lot for it. And the first day when I directed Sanjay Dutt and then I directed Amitabh Bachchan, I was not nervous at all. And I was very shocked at myself that why I was not nervous, because I was very well prepared, and it was a superb experience. And that point when I directed the film, I realized this is what I want to do. So basically, I've always wanted to be. I write, I produce, but everything I do is because I want to direct. So I love directing. I love being on the set, and I really enjoyed doing it. And it was one of the best experience I had, and people were really nice. And working with Amitabh Bachchan for the first time, you're like directing a first film, and he was really good. And I realized at that point that why he's such a big legend, because he was so professional and he was so well prepared, and he was really nice. And whatever I wanted, he never like looked down and was not patronizing. And because, like I said, I had not worked with many actors, so you don't, at that point, you don't approach them as saying that, sir, and this, that. So I was like, okay, I don't think this is working and that working and all. And he was like, okay. But anyway, it was a good experience. It worked well. But after then the film didn't get released. So the next few years at that point really started my journey, because it's a good thing it didn't happen in retrospect. But at that point it was very disappointing for me, because I thought I had arrived, and it's so easy. And then I realized, fuck, this is not what it is. The reality is that it's a long journey. So when the film didn't happen, it took like for 2-3 years of your life, it was like a very hard time for me, because I didn't know what to do then after that, because that was the only script I had, that was the only film I wanted to do. So it took me a lot of time to get over it. And then I started writing. So I decided, okay, the only way I'm going to get to make another film was that I start writing, because nobody else is going to give me, and nobody had seen my work fair enough. Nobody knew who I was. And I started writing. So I started working on a few scripts. Again, my scripts were like the big films, again with three heroes or thrillers and action. And I started going, meeting people. So a lot of people at that time, when you go to big producers, they were like, okay, I went to like the biggest production houses, and a couple of them told me that the script is good, but nobody would want to work with you as a new director, and it's action. So can you
And
write a
what
script?
around what time is this roughly?
Around 5 years back. 5 years back was that. So I started doing that, and I wrote two scripts. One was based in it was an action thriller, which was based in Sweden, because I used to go there a lot, because I have I have some friends there. And the other one was based in Japan, because I go to Japan a lot, and because my husband has his office there. So it was all the experiences, and it was fun, and I really wrote it, but it was just hard to make it. And people thought that, okay, then why don't you sell the script to us and we get another director? But my thing was, I always didn't want, it was not that I was writing for somebody else. I wanted to direct myself, and I said no, I just held on to the script. And after some time, I realized that it is going to be hard to do what I want to do, but I just wanted to make films, and I wanted to produce, and I wanted to do so many stuff. And by then, it's bizarre. And, sometimes I think about it, how it happened was, I just one day overnight said, okay, the only way to do is that if I want to have fun, I want to do the kind of work, I should start producing. And I had absolutely no knowledge, like no knowledge. I just said, okay, then I'll have more control. I'll have, more freedom to do what I want, and it'll be fun to do other people's projects. I don't mind doing that. And so there was a writer called Bhavish Mandalia, and he had just written, oh my God, he had written Angrezi medium. He was there. He was hired for my movie as a dialogue writer. So I had written the entire film in English, and because I can't write Hindi so well, so we had got him to write the dialogue. And when I started working with him in the film, and he came in as a dialogue writer, we had the worst time. We fought every day because at
Right.
at at that time I didn't realize that. Of course, now I do, but at that time, because I had written the dialogues in English, and in English they were very clever, and all those words you use. But when somebody comes in as a dialogue writer, and somebody who's as good as him, they are not looking. They're not going to translate, right? They are going to bring the tone, and it's going to be different. And he and me never saw eye to eye. And so we had huge fights. And finally, I told him, okay, I don't want you. I don't want to work with you. And, don't come on my set ever. And so I stopped talking to him because I didn't talk to him during my set. It was a strange experience. And it was funny because the day when I said that, okay, I want to do something interesting, I want to produce, the only person I could think was him, because I knew he's he's a very talented writer. And of course, I had become matured by then, and I was not as arrogant. And, the thing is that in life, when you reach, it's lucky sometimes, when you think you've done it, and then when you reach rock bottom, then everything is done, and you come with a lot of humility and maturity. So I went, and I called him up, and then we met. And he was also, by then, he was writing a lot. He was writing for Phantom, and he was doing a lot of films. And what happens with writers is people are doing so many scripts, and most of them don't see the light of day. And he was also frustrated, and he was like me. He wanted to do something interesting where there's no control. They're not projects; they are films that are being made. And it was, again, he was also, I don't know for what reason, both of said, okay, let's start a company. We had absolutely, again, no knowledge, no money, no knowledge at all. And what had happened was, by then I was reading. So I know Manu Joseph because, we were both journalists at one point. So I just knew of him. And I was reading Serious Men at that time when we just started the company. We had not even registered the company. We were just thinking of the name Bombay Fables. This was exactly 4 years back. And so I read Serious Men, and I said, okay, wow, I really like this book, and I want to direct it. So I reached out to Manu on Facebook, just one of those messages, and then he was like, yeah, great, let's meet. And we got along really well. And but then we realized that, of course, it's going to be a difficult film to make. The book is not easy. And at that point, Bhavish was working with Sudhir Mishra, and all of us realized that the best person to make the film would be Sudhir Mishra. And thank God for that, because he made a great film. And then we met him, and it's just that at that point when we met him, Netflix had just come to India, and it just happened that they had approached him, and then he asked me whether we should do it for Netflix, and we were like, wow, let's do it. And then after that, when we met Nawaz, and Nawaz, like, it was like strange, because when we met Nawaz, we met him one night when we were shooting with Anurag at Sacred Games. We met him at 12 midnight, Bhavish, Sudhir, and me. And when Bhavish narrated to him, he immediately said yes, and he loved it. So after we came out, I was like, did he really say that? Because you don't trust when somebody tells you, I'm going to do it, and, it's a great film. And that's how it started. So Serious Men was actually the film that helped us, and it did very well. And actually, Serious Men was the film that gave me the experience of becoming a producer, because at that point it was all about, I want to write, I want to direct. And when we started working on Serious Men, so at that point I was supposed to be the active producer. We were co-producing with Sudhir. Sudhir was the director, and Bhavesh was writing it. So we all had our roles, but I didn't take my role as a producer very seriously, because I hired a EP. And I was like, oh wow, I would go once in a while, and I was involved in all the actor readings, but I never sat on what you're supposed to do on the budgeting and stuff like that. And so it was the first day of Serious Men, and I was excited. So walked on the set like, oh wow, the producer and all that. And we're supposed to start rolling at 9 a.m. And at 7:30 in the morning, my EP, she just walked out of the set. She had a nervous breakdown, and she walked out. She just checked out. And I was like, what the hell happened? And I had no idea what was going on till then, because you're given it to an EP, and it was everybody else was. I was involved
Right.
in a lot of other stuff. And then at that point, because I took over the project, Bhavish and me, like, we took over entirely. And it was a great learning experience, because from that day till we finished the film, I was there every day on the set from six, before the spot boys came, before the lights, I was there until they packed up. At one point, Nawaz was like, then when Nawaz and me used to chat later on, he became a friend. He was like, I have to see you walking around and behaving. I have to say, is she really the producer? She's not behaving well. And I have to pick up stuff. And I was
Right.
there. So that really, it was really hard at that time. There were nights we didn't sleep because we were so scared, because this was going to be a disaster, because none of us knew what was happening. That moment we learned everything that was on producing. Like now, if I can look at the budget, I can look at the scheduling, everything. So everything I felt, what for me came from something like, direction happened. The film didn't happen. I learned a lot. And when Serious Men, when we had a fallout, when the producer walked out, I learned everything that was on producing. So that is how the journey started. And Serious Men, we put and Serious Men did well. And
Right.
then by then, Manu Joseph had become a great friend. So the thing was that, when you work with the author of the book, everybody is afraid to involve the author, and people are very sacred about what they've written, understandably so. And and Serious Men has a lot of fans and followers and all. And the book and the film we adapted was very different from the book. But Manu, me, all of us really hit it off really well. He's a very close friend. And that point, he became very close, and he was on the set every day. But it was just there because he was also learning and he was enjoying. Not once did it was part of it. So we had become very good friends. And then Manu told me about an idea he had written. It was called Keep Calm then. And it was like a funny English kind of series about a couple separating. And when he told the idea, I just loved it. But we were like, who's going to make it? So we worked on it for a while, and then luckily Decoupled happened with Manu. So that's how the Bombay Fables journey started. And then we got Asur 2, which we are producing. We are Delhi Crime, which we are the creative producers, which released this week. And we're doing another Netflix series. So that's how it started.
Wow, that's quite a journey. I really appreciate you going through the entire journey, because it's always a learning experience for people who are listening, and especially
Yeah.
aspiring writers, producers. Sejal, how long has it been now since you officially co-founded Bombay Fables? 2 years, 3 years?
4 years. 4
4
years.
years. So today,
Yeah.
looking back on those 4 years, if I was to ask you, what is your approach at Bombay Fables as producers? What would you say?
So, I know it's a dirty word sometimes, or I don't know, it's a cliche that we are very content driven. And I say that, and story driven. I say that because both of us are writers and directors. So for us, story and content is the main thing. So I feel that is the what drives Bombay Fables, and that is what is most important for us. Everything comes second. So I would say that is our main core.
And in terms of content, what do you look at? Do you look at just interesting content, or you're looking at trends? You're looking at variety? What kind of stuff are you looking at?
So, interestingly, today somebody had come. So, we are always meeting a lot of writers, and we have a lot of people who work with us. So, in fact, today somebody had come and she asked me the same question. And I said that unlike, most people, it's not something specific. It's not that we are looking at only series, we are looking at only movies, or looking at this genre, not actors, star driven. We are just looking at any story that is exciting, anything what moves us, what likes us, and what even stories which I wouldn't do it. Like, I can't direct or write. Like, I can't write a romantic film, can't write a horror film, but that is something I would like somebody else to do. So anything that excites us, anything that's a great story, we are always interested in producing.
I see. Now, there are at least a dozen mainstream streaming platforms now, right? Including global players like Netflix, Amazon, and the domestic ones like MX Player, Z5, Wood, and many others. As a production company, how do you go about finding the right match for the content that you have produced?
So what has happened to us is, in the beginning, because of Serious Men Decoupled, and then we are doing another series for Netflix, we have worked a lot with Netflix. Now that has been also because, of course, once you work with a platform, there is a certain, you enjoy the experience. Hopefully they enjoy. That is why they do it again with you. And what happens, there's a certain kind of rapport and you know what to expect, right? They know what to expect, know what to. So for us, we worked a lot with Netflix. And so what we ideally do is that we go to them first, or, somebody else. But it's not necessary. Like right now, we are working with two other platforms. One is Woot, and there is another platform which I'm doing a series on. So it's necessarily not that, but I mean, I think if we look at the partner, is that the kind of stuff we are making, we know that this is what the platform would be. So I can't. It's not specific that okay, I will go to Netflix, I'll go to Amazon, I'll go to Woot, I'll go to Z. It just depends on at that point you think this is the right person to go to right content. So that's how we do it. But and we work only with 3-4. It's not that I'm not worked with Amazon, I'm not worked with MX. So just the 3-4 platforms we know, the people we work with, we go and pitch to them first. So the journey becomes easier. Gotcha. And most platforms, I think they are very pretty clear. When you go to them, they're saying, okay, this is not what we are looking. We have too much of thriller. We have too much of this, and we are looking for. But we always start going to people who we know. So it's an easier journey.
Okay. And how has been your experience working with Netflix? You have been a partner with them for both of your the feature film as well as the show. So obviously it has worked for you guys. But any professional relationship, just like any other relationship, there is always some things that you need to work on, some things that you need to develop. What has that experience been like in terms of between Bombay Fables and Netflix?
So for us, I know everybody, if you speak to all producers, everybody has something with a platform, right? I didn't have this experience. I didn't have a good experience, must be production, creative relationship. But for us, so far, Netflix has been a very good home for us. And it's because I'll tell you, the thing is that if not for, when we started, Bhavesh and me, the complete outsiders in the sense, nobody knew us. I'm a journalist. Bhavesh is actually a software engineer who just got into writing. And we are not one of those. It's a big boys club. There are a lot of big producers who have been around for a long time and really big players. But what happened for us was that because they respected the content and they said, okay, we will give you because your content is good. And at one point, of course, when we started Serious Men, they did question that whether, okay, you are good writers and creators, but will you be able to produce? Because that itself is another big elephant, to produce. So at that point, Netflix did have doubts that, whether we were able to produce, whether we had the kind of capability. But obviously, after Serious Men and Decoupled, they trust us more. Now we are doing a very big show for them. And we have also upped our game in the sense now, Bhavesh and me, we only look at creative content for the company. We work on producers. We've hired a lot of people. So now we have a creative producer, a producer who's working with us and handles all the production. So, so now what has happened is now there is the thing that we are not into the production. Because what happens is with Netflix and a lot of things that you spend a lot of time looking at production. Okay. And then and then you have to spend time on the other creative part of it. But now since that is taken care of, it has been an easier journey. And with Netflix, honestly, we've had a very good experience. And I will give that to them that, it would have been very difficult for people like us, to get a foot in any of these platforms. So we've not had a bad experience. They've been very good partners. We work with all of them and, it's been very respectful and professional.
I see. Okay. And since there has been a lot of churn at Netflix India recently, that hasn't affected any of your shows or anything like that, right?
Yeah, because the people, none of the shows, in the sense there is a slowdown. There was, at one point, this show we are doing for Netflix, it took some time to get greenlit, but there is not, it's not affected us in a way that it would have.
Sejal, wanted to talk about the trends in OTT content and wanted to, pick your brain on that. What are some of the interesting trends that you're seeing in consumption of the content and how has that changed in the last few years in your experience, with respect to the pie share of the major players in the field, with respect to genres, with respect to average duration of consumption, and so forth? What are you seeing in the data out there?
So we felt, I should say that when we started the OTT, like we were one of the first people when we started Serious Men. At that point, I felt that everybody, all the platforms were going to be very strong on content and not star driven. And I'm not saying it in a bad way. There is no harm in being star driven, but all over the world, if you see even Netflix America, when they started, and a lot of platforms, it was started for the fact that you have content and it doesn't matter, you just choose good actors. So I thought that was going to be what it should have been, where you look at great stories, great content, and you don't run after the stars, because that was there. The cinema was for that, and then it's accessible for those people. But it started off that way. But I feel that now over the years, what has happened is we are back to where we should, we are back to that. This almost feels like TV and cinema, where everybody wants, big stars. They tell you how many Instagram followers you have, and they are still want to work with the big players. And so I felt that was quite disappointing, because then what happens, and I'm not saying TV is bad. Okay, I think there is cinema, there's TV, there's OTT. And what happens is, one had expected that in OTT you would have time. Okay, you take a year and a half to write, like what they do. You'll have a big writer's room, and then you'll choose an actor who suits the role. But I feel over the years, because of competition, or I don't know for what reason, everybody feels that now it still is now suddenly a lot of it's star driven, and everybody wants quick churning out. So I feel that sometimes, the content suffers because of that. And it's unfortunate, because, and one would have felt they would have given chance to newcomers, new writers, new directors, and new actors. But I feel that it has changed a bit in that space.
That's interesting, because I wanted to talk about this stuff with you later on. But since we are already there, I will segue to that just for a minute. As we speak, there is somewhat panic in Bollywood, right, so to speak, as everything seems to be falling short at the box office. And the star system seems to be on its way out. And it does feel like, we are somewhere, we stand at a major inflection point. Do you see that happening, or do you really think that this is just a recency bias and things are again going to go back to the norm? Or do you really feel like this is a major inflection point?
I see. I feel that this is a major inflection point, and I hope that it is, because, see, like I was saying, like people like us, like I said, that and I consider us as lucky and outsiders, where we got a chance to produce. And if 10 years back, 8 years back, we would have never become producers. And I'm saying that with all confidence, because the cinema is so star driven, and it is run by very few people, and I feel that sometimes it's a powerful male club, they all run it, and everybody feels comfortable working with the same people. So, in the OTT platform, that was a good thing. But even now, as a company, when as a director, even when when I want to work with a certain actor, they could be a big star, or somebody who fits the role. It's still, I always felt, even a year back, was very star driven, and you go with good script to actors. You've gone to some good script with some of the big actors, and they are okay what to do, but who's backing you? Like, you need a bigger producer. So at that point, you always, even though you're a producer, you have to get somebody who has no contribution, get in as a co-producer, because they want to work with them. So I felt that was one of the very disappointing. And we've been very lucky. Like, we worked with Nawaz, we worked with Maddie, we are working with Pratik Gandhi, and these people are like, we enjoy working with them. I just want to work with guys who fit the actors, male, female, who fit the role, who are fun to work with, and who are nice people. I think that is very important. And we have been really lucky, like Nawaz and Maddie. Like, Maddie was one of the nicest people to work with, Pratik Gandhi and all. So we are very happy working in that space. And so sometimes when you want to make a film, obviously it's not that, you don't, I'm not saying that anything wrong to change the stars, because the people, some projects need something like that. It still becomes difficult. because everybody's working in that kind of sphere. People are asking a lot of money. They want to work with the same people. And no, even if things are failing, nobody's trying something new because they feel that, okay, even if things are failing, I'll try something else again, the same thing. So I feel that it is a good thing, and I'm not saying I'm saying that good films are being made. Whatever reasons people don't like it, I think everything is a good film. Because as far as it's entertaining for somebody, all the films are good. But I feel that maybe things will change, and people will start. And a lot of I in fact today I heard that a lot of actors who are charging a lot of money, they are willing to now take back end deals and go in. That's a great improvement, and it's a good thing for all of us. So yeah.
Right. And do you think there is going to be a point where, we are going to see some form of star system develop in the OTT world, eventually, because sooner or later it's going to follow the same pattern. And, some of the popular names from the shows that are, widely popular, they're going to become these huge stars. And then we're back to kind of square one.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That is a possibility, because that happens with everywhere. Television, it happened in television. You had these big, huge stars on television, and they were charging a lot of money, and people wanted them, so everybody was chasing them. And in OTT, it is bound to happen, and I think at a certain level it has happened, because right now, they are looking for those kind of names which have done well in OTT already. So I think it is bound to happen, but I feel that there, at least I feel that, okay, they want the big stars, they might want the big OTT players, but because there's so much work happening, the advantage is that a lot of people will still get work. I feel that, because there are so many shows, like, as a director who's new and wants to work, I know that, so many people I know who've been wanting to direct are getting to do shows on OTT. So which I think there's a plus and minus. So it's a good thing. There'll be all kinds of people who'll get work.
What would you say were some of your takeaways or lessons, so to speak, from the journeys that you have had with Serious Men and Decoupled? Something, that was a creative takeaway for you from that experience as a production studio, something that you're going to take with you into your projects.
So I'll tell you, the thing is that one thing which worked for us, and which we hope it will, that content and story is a driving force for us. Money is not, and that is why we feel that we have achieved what we wanted to do. We always consider ourselves a boutique company where we are just doing 3-4 good shows. So when money is not the driving factor, and I'm not saying money is bad, because it will eventually happen. So I feel that has worked for us. But what are the learnings is that I felt that a lot of things we went wrong in budgeting and stuff like that I have learned, and that I feel is very essential. That when for a producer or a director or a writer to understand all forms of filmmaking, because ultimately there is money involved, there are a lot of people involved, and another. So that I felt was one learning experience I had, is to understand where budgets come from. That every film has a budget, every series has a budget, and one has to follow it. And the most important thing I feel is that is the one reason I wanted to become a producer, is not because of that, okay, you become, it's something like a power game, or it's the money. It is because then you have more, whatever, a little bit more creative control. So I know as a director, as a writer, where I want to put my money on. So what happens is, like, like recently, because I'm directing a film, and I'm the producer also, and Bhavesh is writing it, and he's also the producer. What we told our team, because we all are working with EPs and LPs and all, even we are the producers, they run the show budgets for us. We told them that, we will do, you give us a budget, you give us a number of days, we will do it in that. But then allow us to decide where to put the money, because, that is what I feel is important. That, okay, I'm going to give you the film, I'm going to give you in 45 days, but I don't want to spend most of my money in costumes. Okay, so I told them that, okay, I don't want to be OB on costumes. I want to save money on that. So fuck it, let them wear one. I don't care if they're not wearing the best clothes or something. It's not important. Give me this camera one day, get me this actor. So these are the choices we made. Like sometimes even if it's a big name, they used to come to us that this guy is very good, big name, but asking for that money. I said no. I want somebody else, and I put the money there. So I feel that these are the things which have given us an advantage when you direct and produce. And I feel that is something one should take advantage of. It gives you the freedom more than anything else. Gives you the freedom to do what you want, what you like. And because everybody knows, I mean, filmmaking is so hard, and you're working with so many people. And if you are going to betray somebody, somebody is going to feel bad, you're going to be mean to somebody. So I feel the main thing what I have learned, and which, see, when I started off, I felt that at that point one is very anxious, one is trying to prove himself, and you're arrogant, or there are a lot of learning. But over the years, I realized one thing is that everything is very over. Like talent, I feel is very overrated, and sometimes I feel in this industry, there's a lot of among directors, actors, everybody comes with a lot of entitlement and privilege. So one thing was very clear when we started, and which we do, is I just want to work with good people, because that was one of the main important things which we feel in Bombay Fables we do. And everybody we work with, even when I choose my team when I'm directing, I'm like, I just want to work with good people, because this is not some brain surgery. We're not trying to save lives. So everybody doesn't have to scream, shout, be mean, and I don't want anybody to have a nervous breakdown, because ultimately it's just a film. We'll all work together and put it. So I feel these are the good things one can do when you're a producer. I mean, that is the freedom I want, more than anything else, to enjoy what you're doing.
I see. Great. Yeah, that's a great mantra. Going back to what you said. So you give us a number. Let me do the allocation of the money. I get to decide what to do. And just keep the thing simple that way. So that's a good takeaway for our aspiring, production people. Sejal, are you a fan of K-dramas?
No, unfortunately, I'm the only one who hasn't seen it. Everybody is talking about it, so I haven't seen it.
Okay, that's fine. I was just going to ask you, what do you think about the K-drama wave and its success and the reasons behind it?
So that's one thing I haven't watched, because I watch a lot of series, I watch a lot of films, but I haven't still been able to watch K-drama.
Okay. So, Sejal, both Asur and Delhi Crime were great shows, the first seasons. Bombay Fables, like you said, is involved with the second seasons of both these shows. Again, could you share some of the reasons, besides it is great content, we know that, but behind why you guys decided to back these two shows and why they seemed like a match for Bombay Fables? Because there is a lot of good shows. Could you go into a little bit detail as to why you chose these two shows?
So, see, Asur was the first season did really well, and it was one of the top shows, for Woot, one of the top shows in India. It was very popular. So, Gaurav Shukla, who has written and created, he was the one of the producers with us on Asur. So when Woot came to Gaurav to write the second season, he was already working with us on various projects and all, and he was producing with us so he produced with us Asur also. And so at that point he said that I want to do it with Bombay Fables, and that's how we produced it. And the thing was that we really liked, and Gaurav is a fantastic writer, and we really liked the show. So that was one of the reasons we did Asur. And Asur has actually been one of the big challenging tasks for us. That was another learning we had, because it started off with a show and it's become a huge. We shot over 80 days, and it's 1 hour, more than an hour. And Oni, who's the original, who directed season one, also has done season two. And it's like much bigger and like much tougher than season one to produce. So we had a very tough time to produce it, because COVID happened, and there was rains and a lot of things, and there's huge ass VFX and all. So that was one show. Again, we got to learn a lot, that we were not very well prepared in terms of, because we didn't expect so many things to happen. So so Asur was great, and we are still into the post of it was delayed a bit because of COVID, and we are still doing the post because of the VFX was much larger than what we expected. So Asur was one of the reasons. That's how Asur happened. And Delhi Crime was actually, Delhi Crime has it's a licensed show, and they have other producers. So what had happened was Delhi Crime was already shot season two, and I think Netflix was not very happy with the way it turned out to be. So then they came to us. So Bhavesh and me, we don't. So because essentially Bhavesh is also a writer. A lot of people think he writes outside, but we don't write or direct anything which we produce. So they came to us and they wanted Bhavesh to rewrite Delhi Crime. So we said we will do it, but we will be Bombay Fables will be the creative producers on that, and that's why it was rewritten and reshot for 50 days, and that's how we got involved in Delhi Crime.
Very interesting. I see. Okay. Yeah, both shows are great. I loved the first seasons of both shows a lot. And, especially Asur. Asur was such a great show. It's my kind of genre. I really dig that.
Yeah.
And then, Sejal, you're working on 2 biopics, very interesting ones at that. And this is where I have a lot of questions for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first one is on public prosecutor Ujjwal Nikam. And the other is on Gustavo Fernandez, who was a very interesting customs officer. Let's talk about biopics in general for a minute before we talk about the 2 projects that you guys are working on. Do you think it's possible to make fair, balanced biopics in today's times when we're seeing audiences getting increasingly polarized with their worldviews, political slants and whatnot? And how do you keep that balance when you're trying to make a biopic on someone, who's essentially a big living human being? I mean, it's not like somebody, who's an historical figure.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to do that. But what has happened with both these biopics is that actually what it's turned out to be the scripts what Bhavesh has written is basically they are stories of we are not looking at as what happened. It's not like on the custom officer. It's not about the case. It's about the human being. So what essentially it's become is both these stories are about a father, okay, and the father's journey. So I feel that we didn't for us, by both these stories or whatever biopics is basically the emotional journey of that person. So the controversies are not important because I just find it anything political and not because of anything else. I just find it that it's boring. I don't want to get into that, and not because I'm a very political person. I've been a journalist, but I feel that people are interested in the person behind it, and the emotion behind it. So we've approached both the biopics incidentally, not because of anything else. That both is a journey of a father, about a father and a daughter. Like the custom officer, it's about his father and daughter, and the daughter's telling the story about the father. So it's not that just becomes incidental. But what becomes important is that what the character goes through and the emotional journey, and which I feel is ultimately all stories are about that. Because if you look at even a film like on when they did on Steve Jobs, it was ultimately about the relationship with the daughter because nothing else matters. We might say we are doing all these great things, and you might be an inventor, you might be a soldier, you might be whoever, but ultimately it is a human emotion and it is a relationship with one person or it's your own self. So I feel that this is what the stories are. If you talk about look at any of the films on aliens, even on aliens, you look at on space or anything. Ultimately, it comes to the fact is that how much you love your father, daughter, son, how much you love yourself and your emotions and your relationships. That's what it becomes.
The emotional core is the crux.
Right? Yeah.
And for both of these films, are these people on board in the sense that are they going to be signing off, like Nikam and Fernandez?
Yeah. So, I mean, they all taken life rights and we take them.
Great.
And
Okay. So these are like authorized kind of projects.
Yeah.
Well, that's also important because it lends it a lot more credence that way, I think.
Yeah. And because it depends on when you start working on it and what do you want out of the project. Because there are some, and I'm not saying it's intentional controversy, but there are some things there's a controversy behind it and you want to tell that story. But this is not what the story I wanted to tell right from the beginning about the custom officer. It was always about the man because he's living alone and about his life. And when you hear the story, you realize why it is not the controversy is not important. It's about everything else after that happens to somebody.
When I first heard that there was a film in the making on a legendary customs officer, I kept on wondering, who would it be? Because there is a reasonably long list of custom officers with very interesting stories and where almost every story, falls at the intersection of customs, Mumbai underworld and Bollywood in some way or other. And as someone, who at one point in time was obsessed with reading everything I could lay my hands on when it came to Mumbai underworld. I was very, very curious. Would it be Sudhakar Bokade? Would it be, Farooq Batatawala? Would it be Daya Shankar? Or would it be
There are
Kostao?
Shankar,
Yeah.
yeah, there are
And
so many people,
there are so many people, and they all have interesting stories, and there are so many angles to
yeah.
it. My question to you is, why this particular story? What makes it compelling for you? Without obviously letting any spoilers out or anything like that. So,
So it was actually, because I am an ex-journalist. I have a lot of journalist friends, and I keep meeting them all the time because
right.
there are so many interesting stories happening. And like I said, I don't know many people from the film industry. I still have all my journalist friends, so I keep meeting them. And one of my friends, Pranati Mehra, who's a journalist, was with Express, and we were discussing. Actually, we were working on another story. I was working with her, and then I met through some contacts, and then I came to know about him, and I was just fascinated. And then I was like, wow, what a story. And this has happened in 1990s and nobody knows about it. And then I met him, and he and me are still very good friends, and we chat regularly. And also I'm the kind of person, so like, we had a bond, and, I spent so much time with him, went to Goa, and, he's still a friend. And whenever the film happens, because right now we push the film a bit, but whenever the film happens, he's part of it, and he doesn't, and he knows, like, when I first narrated the script to him, I told him, listen, this is the crux. There are some things we have dramatized, there is there's a song, there is this, that, and all things. He was like, yeah, okay, and all that. So he is, if you meet him, like, he's just a fascinating person, and, I just like being with him. And, because see, I think everybody knows that, when you're making a film, or when you're directing, especially producing is different, but when you're directing or writing, you have to spend 1-2 years with somebody, or that subject, or that story, and you have to be interested, you have to be moved by it, and you have to enjoy it. So I felt that, I really wanted to, I really liked him, I liked his story, and I found it was fascinating, it was so emotional, and I met his family, and, so it was, yeah. So I feel that was one of the reasons I really wanted to do it.
And
Because,
sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry.
Is it true that Nawaz is attached to this project?
So we were discussing that, but right now, it's like we are just finishing the script and all. So I mean, we are not. I mean, I'm just finishing the script
Okay,
still.
I see.
So
So
that's the
casting is
reason.
still to be done. Okay. And how about Nikam? Is that something that you have thought about the casting for that?
No, no, we just finished
Okay.
the script, and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, like I said, I many years ago I had this idea of a small limited series, episodic series about customs officers, and where each episode would be essentially these interesting stories that fall at this
Oh wow,
intersection, like I mentioned to you, with all these people, because their stories are just fascinating. I mean, you
yeah,
take any
yeah,
of these,
yeah, yeah.
people, and their stories are very fascinating. So I'm really looking forward to this one particular picture, and Nikam as well. But yeah, both of these sound really interesting.
Thank you.
And what's the other series, Sejal, that you guys are working on besides Asur and Telecrime? There is one more show, right?
So yeah, that's a show we are doing, but I mean, it's with it's in development. We are shooting in October, so it's like it's been out in the news, but
Okay.
officially you can't
Oh, you cannot talk about it.
talk
Okay.
about it. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Great.
that we are shooting in October. So that's a big series that we've been researching for 2 years.
I
So
see.
basically, a lot of work we've done, like even the biopics, all these series and all. A lot of things is very real, story based and all. And because luckily for me, I had no like a lot of journalists. So these are interesting. You meet them and you get real sources from them and real stories and all. So that is quite interesting. That I tap all my journalistic sources in that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I mean, one of the greatest backgrounds that you could come from is journalism when it comes to storytelling,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah. So
that's
it's
what it is.
funny so when I started filmmaking and I wanted to direct a film, at that point, nobody was, everything related to real stories or documentaries was not happening. This is the last trend in the last 10 years, 8 7 8 years. So I remember I had just finished making my two documentaries, and they had won a lot of awards and all. And whenever I used to go and meet people, like my producer, when I used to go and meet actors, they were like, don't tell people you do documentaries. Don't tell people you're a journalist because they think it'll be boring. So there was this tag attached, you won't believe it, that they used to tell me that don't tell them you got from a documentary background because, or journalistic background, because they'll think you'll make uninteresting stuff and all, because documentaries at that point had that kind of stigma. And now it's just all the real stories, and everybody's turning out are all real stories and biopics and people like that. So it's a strange turn of events. And you know how it happens, right? When there's a trend, everybody wants to make biopics. Everybody wants to do that. That's the way it works.
Right, right. And then the boat gets really full on one side. And the other
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
cool. This was really great, Sejal. Thank you so much for joining us for this chat, and appreciate this chance of talking about the projects that you guys are working on, and also just the space and this, production just in general. Because I think these are very interesting times, and like all of us are witnessing, I think the focus is sort of shifting from the big screen to streaming. And I think the momentum is only going to continue in the future. So this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
If you liked the episode, do share this episode on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And do subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your pods. Also, please do rate and review the podcast when you get a chance. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the episode notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And as always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.